All right, it looks like we have got a great group joining us, so let's go ahead and get started. So my name is Amanda Plisco. I am on the marketing team here at JM&A Group, and I will be your moderator today for finding your path to profitability in the service drive, and we'll go over the 4 trends shaping fixed operations. So before we dive in, I just want to say that JM&A Insider is all about providing you anytime access to expert level content that can help you improve your dealership, advance your career, or just get some more information and knowledge on things that you're interested in knowing about in the automotive world. First and foremost, this afternoon is all about you. We're here to answer your questions and hear what you have to say. So I encourage you to type any questions you have throughout the office hour session in the chat in this Zoom, and we will get to them in those few moments that we have set aside for question and answer in the middle of the presentation and then again towards the end. So today we're talking all about fixed operations, and it's making up a large part of each dealership's profits. But it seems like there are still a lot of gray areas for some people. So today we're going to dive into where we've been, where we are, and where we're going. We'll talk about the 4 trends that are shaping fixed operations in our industry today. Of course, as I mentioned, we'll do a couple question and answer sessions. So I encourage you to type those questions into the chat. And we'll talk about JM&A Group's approach to fixed operations and how that's shifted recently and what we're offering now to dealers. And of course, also we'll talk about where you can find some more information on JM&A Insider. So let's jump right into introductions. As I said, my name is Amanda Plisco. I've been with JM&A Group for a little over a year, and with our parent company, JM Family, for 7 years before that. And I focus on content and communications and crafting materials that ultimately better serve you, our dealers. Joining me today are our fixed operations consulting team, Justina Davis, Robert Peterson, and Jack Banks. Guys, would you like to introduce yourselves and we'll get started?
Absolutely. Thank you, Amanda. My name is Jack Banks. I am the lead consultant for fixed operations in the southeastern part of the United States. I have been with JM&A for almost 19 years now and spent almost that much time in retail. And I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. My name is Robert Peterson. I'm also lead consultant for JM&A. I've been with JM&A for 16 years, and prior to that, spent 24 years in the retail automotive world.
Well, thank you all for joining us today for office hours. I'm Justina Davis. I'm Assistant Vice President of Fixed Operations Consulting for JM&A Group. I have had the pleasure of working for JM&A for 23 years, and 10 years prior to that, automotive retail, wearing many different hats. And we're excited to have you here today for office hours. You know, we want this to be a discussion about what are the 4 key trends that we hear the most about and that we're seeing that are really relevant in helping our dealers, fixed operations departments grow their business. And we also want to talk to you today about JM&A's consulting offerings and why we shifted gears to really look more into helping our dealers grow their service departments. Before we do that, I want to share with you some interesting information on what's happening in our industry right now. So we're, where we are, right? Dealerships turnover across the US has reached new heights. And if you look at this graph, you'll see the numbers from 2017 to 2019. In total dealership, there's been a 6% increase overall in the last 2 years. And then you look on the service end, and it's been an 8% increase in the last 2 years. And that's just really an emphasis on service advisors, not on technicians and the other service personnel. Turnover continues to increase year over year. That gap causes performance issues. It creates an inability for you to manage your customer demands and then ultimately retain your service personnel long term. When we go in to work with dealers, we're looking at part of our consulting offering is a talent management, where we look at their personnel and see why they're leaving the dealerships. And in many cases, we've noticed that there are dealers on the sales and service end that are running over 100% turnover. So as a dealer, or a service manager, do you ever ask yourself, what does this cost me in turnover a year? And have you really evaluated those numbers versus looking at what it would cost to have consultants come in and implement some proven processes in place that help you retain your service personnel long term? And that's really where part of my team comes in to help you do that, and really assess where those needs are coming from. Some of the other things we're going to talk about today are how to help you reduce that turnover in regards to your talent management. We also want to share with you our fixed operations profit. Why is fixed ops driving some of your businesses more so now than before? And obviously there's margin compressions on the variable side of the business that we're all aware of. But NADA, showed that in 2018, most of our dealers grossed $6.8 million in total dealership gross. And if you look at the graph, you'll see that 49% represents fixed operations. So what it's showing you is from 2014 to 2018, fixed operations profits per dealer have increased nearly $600,000 in the last 5 years in overall profits. That's a huge number. And I think there's being more of an emphasis now placed on what do we need to do in our service departments, right? What type of processes do we need to implement to help us grow that business and retain our customers? When JM&A looked at this data, and we've been evaluating data for several years, it was a catalyst for us to change what our offerings currently are, and move us in the direction of helping our dealers go in. And we do, as part of our consulting, a business evaluation where we look at 5 key areas in the dealership. And then we do a thorough analysis of each of those, including the financial statements. And then we're able to report back to the dealer how they stand against industry benchmarks. What are the key areas we think we can certainly help them see a lift in? And then we implement a customized plan to do that. So Amanda mentioned we're going to talk about 4 key trends that are shaping fixed operations. And these are some that we hear the most from our dealers, but effective service processes is one of the top ones. Do you have multiple service advisors in your dealerships? And do each of them have a service process that they've kind of created on their own? What does this mean to your customer? You're all consumers on this call today, but when you go into a dealership, do you want a consistent process across the board? So you know exactly how the appointment setting process works when you walk into the dealership, how you're going to be interacted with from the service personnel, A through Z. What does that process look like? We find in many dealerships, there isn't an effective process. Many of the associates didn't receive training, so they kind of create one on their own over time. The second trend is the customer-centric approach. And I think today more so than ever, it's really important for us to interact with our consumers the way they want us to. We're all going through, times with COVID right now. Some customers prefer that touchless approach where they can just come in and drop off the vehicle, have more of the white glove approach where they're not necessarily interacting and putting themselves at risk and interacting with the service personnel. So do you have an approach that works for your customers? How often does your service manager walk out into the lounge area and really interact with the customer and ask them for specific feedback on key things that they could do well? Are they taking a proactive approach versus waiting for that customer to post a review online? When I go out to eat at a restaurant, one of the first things I always do is ask the server's name, and I make sure that I refer to them by their name through the whole process. And then at the end, I ask them to have the manager come over, and they always have this look in their eyes of fear. And the manager comes over, and the manager kind of has that look too. And I make sure that I let them know if it's been an awesome experience, because too often all we're hearing is sometimes the bad feedback. But I think that customer-centric approach is really important, and Jack's going to talk to that a little bit later. The third trend is the talent management. What does the onboarding process look like in your store? Do you just start onboarding the day the person starts, when in fact the onboarding process should start weeks before? What's the training and development opportunities that you offer your service personnel? And this is all something, again, that's part of our consulting offering that we can really help shape in your store. And then the fourth is dealer profitability. And I'm a big believer that if you have effective service process in place, you have a customer-centric approach, and you have a good process in place to retain your associates, you're really going to help drive your bottom line. Part of the evaluation we do is we look at 8 key areas in your financial statements, and we compare that to industry standards for your manufacturer. And then we look at, again, what are the areas where we can help you see the most significant lift and create a customized plan around that. So now that we've shared with you what some of the trends are, the 4 key ones, we really want to hear from you. Out of these 4 trends, which is an area of opportunity or areas of opportunity for your service department? So if you would just take a few seconds to check those off, and then we're going to share that information with you.
It looks like we're getting some great participation, so we'll leave it open for just a few more seconds as you get those votes in, and you can select as many as apply for your team and your dealership. Okay, it looks like we've got a good spread, so I will go ahead and close the poll. Thank you very much for giving us your feedback and input on that. And Justina, go ahead.
Wow. So if we look at the numbers, 50% of you said an area of opportunity is effective service processes. 26% said customer-centric approach. 45 is talent management, and 47 is dealership profitability. So we definitely have 3 key areas that stand out, and effective services processes is the number 1. We're going to touch on all of these today and share with you some best practices. And we'll start with effective service processes. Let's talk about that. You know, how do you enable your team to deliver excellent customer service? You got to have a consistent process on the drive. So these numbers are always very enlightening for me as we share them with you. 85% of customers say the service department experience impacts their likelihood to purchase another vehicle from you. I mean, think about that. That's a huge number. So from, you know, if the average lifespan of a, ownership is 11 years, think about from the first car to the second purchase point, how many opportunities the service department has to interact and sell to your customer. And if 85% of them aren't having a positive experience, they're more likely to purchase from maybe a competitor of yours. 75% of a dealership's prospects that actually call in are for fixed operations. I think this is a huge number, and actually it was higher than I initially thought. So 1 out of 4 of your calls coming into your dealership are for sales. 3 out of 4 are for fixed operations. Again, a tremendous opportunity to implement an effective service process. You know, I've called many service departments mystery shopping on my own to see that it's taken me, multiple phone calls to try to make an appointment. I've been transferred to multiple departments, to the wrong people many times. And, to see that customers are going through that, they're simply going to hang up and research who else is in your area and give them a call. 60% of fixed operations calls are missed opportunities that result in no appointment at all. So you have a lot of customers calling in to ask questions, to find out, if parts are available, what parts cost, and there might not be any attempt to make an appointment to install that part on the customer's car. 60% is a large number, and I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. And then customers said they're 1.5 times more likely to use a dealership service department if they're introduced at the time of sale. And, this becomes part of then your sales process. In many stores, they have a process where the salesperson, walks the customer through the lounge area in the service department, introduces them to someone in the service department. So they kind of have a first contact when they need to come in for their first oil and filter change. And that is, showing right here in the numbers that the customers that they're doing that with are going to be more likely to come back.
Hey, Justina, really quick, I wanted to add one more piece is that there was a study done by Cox Automotive, and appointment conversion rates is a really important statistic. And the number has risen in 2015. We were at 35% of those calls being converted to appointments. And in 2018, it moved up to 52%. So a 17% growth in just 3 years. But there's still, while it's still moving in a great direction, there's still just an incredible opportunity. Think about that, 48% of those calls aren't being converted over. So we've got a lot of room to grow in our business.
Yeah, absolutely, Robert. Thanks for sharing that information. A lot of room for growth. So many of you, 50% said effective service processes. Let's just share with you some key points to think about. Focus on the overall customer experience. I think sometimes we focus on what's convenient for us at the dealership and not what's convenient for the customer, and asking them specific questions on what's the best way to communicate with you. Even I'm in meetings all day like many of you are. If you text me, I'm going to get back to you pretty quick. If you call me and leave a voicemail message and I got to get back to you, it could take many hours for me to do that. So as a consumer, I usually tell people, look, the best way to contact me is via text. Again, it's just understanding your customer. Really reinforcing the importance of effective communication skills. This is so key. And it's something that we do as part of our consulting offering when we go in and do a mystery shop and assess how those customers are interacted with. What are the areas that the dealership is really thriving at, and what are the areas that we can help them with? The third bullet point here I think is important. You don't hear legal compliance mentioned much on the service drive. A lot of that emphasis has been placed in the F&I department. And there are a lot of federal laws that apply to compliance on the drive. And I think it's an important element, certainly something that we educate our dealers on, so that their people can be compliant. And then the fourth one is, have a proven service sales process on the drive. All too often we may ask our service advisors, are you in customer service or are you in sales? And many times they raise their hand and say, I'm in service, part of the business, when in fact, they're in sales. And we just talked earlier about if it's 11 years of ownership, how many touch points service has with a customer, and the tremendous opportunity to sell that customer on the different services is so important. So we do teach a sales process on the drive that is very customer centric, that enables our dealers to grow their bottom line. So these are just some of the best practices that we would certainly help a dealer implement. Next up, we have Jack, and Jack's going to talk to you about the customer-centric approach.
And thank you, Justina. On the screen here, customers should be the center of attention and expect to be treated as such. That almost sounds cliche. And I think most of us do a wonderful job taking care of our customers and being nice, if you will. And I know that this area right here did not rank as high as the others, but with our approach to consulting, we believe in a very foundational support structure, and it really starts at the very beginning, and if you would, blocking and tackling. I want to take a couple of minutes and talk about what we have on the screen here, and this happens to be from Ward's Auto. And they did the study, and these are responses from customers that felt like they had frustrations during their service visits. And the first one, the service took longer than expected, and that was 30% of the customers. And I think a lot of this comes from, again, Justina mentioned communication processes, but I think this comes from the very beginning of the write-up process. So let's just think about this. So a customer comes in. They're here to get a simple oil change. They think they're going to be in and out in 30 minutes or so. But we've made the investment. We wash every service, vehicle. We do an alignment check. We have an alignment checker on the drive. We do a thorough multi-point inspection. But if we think about it, if we offer all of those services, chances of us getting that customer's car back to them in 30 minutes is probably not going to happen. So we have a disconnect from the very beginning. So it comes down to that communication factor right there. So we need to set the expectations of when we're going to get the customer's car back. And, the customer can make the decision, hey, look, I don't want my car washed. I just want to get out of here. Or they can very easily say, you know what, I'll take a few more minutes if I get all these additional services. But it's all about communication. It's just telling the customer what we're going to do, or telling the customer what we offer, and letting them make the decision. You know, the second one here, you know, try to push additional services. You know, I look at this as the aha moment. You know, when the customer's in the lounge, they're doing their work, and here comes the advisor. They got the repair order or multi-point inspection sheet, and hey, by the way, you also need. And I think all too often the customer says to themselves, "Here we go again. They're just simply trying to sell me something." And we know and we find that when we get the customer involved from the very beginning, and we offer multi-point, explain it to them before the car goes into the shop, it's much easier to have that conversation while the car's being finished up to say, by the way, we also noticed that, you know, an alignment would be something that you might want to consider investing in. So it comes down to, again, communication processes, getting the customer engaged, involved at all points of the service visit. So there's three other points that I'd like to talk about with a customer-centric approach. You know, providing a positive and consistent experience. And again, Justina touched on this just briefly, but if we look at a scenario in which someone comes into the service drive, they meet Advisor A. Advisor A does a great job, friendly meet and greet, does a great walk around, tells the customer why they want to do the walk around, talks about the multi-point, keeps them updated and informed during the service, does an excellent job at active delivery. The customer could very easily say, you know, this is a great place. I love getting my car serviced here. But if they return and they come to Advisor B, which could be very successful, but if Advisor B doesn't give those same services, you know, the customer could very easily walk away and go, I wonder why I didn't get the multi-point. I don't know why I didn't get a good explanation of what was done to my car. And it's very easy for that customer to say, you know, this is just normal service. And that customer can very easily slip away. So I think it's very important that we have a consistent, positive experience for the customer by all advisors, just not the best ones, if you would. The second point here, you know, doing business on the customer's terms. You know, I think we make those investments. I think dealers have spent a lot of money making sure that we make it easy to do business with us. But, you know, Cox Automotive did a study in which 45% of customers said they did not make an appointment online, even though they would have done so. And the reason that they did not was simply because they didn't know that service was available. So at the time of delivery, or maybe even at the first service visit, having a conversation about all the amenities, all the services that we offer, is absolutely crucial. You know, there again, the customer wants to, you know, they want to do business on their terms, and we want to do that. And again, we've made the investment in so many cases. We just have to make sure the customer knows, excuse me, that that's the case. Always maintain transparency. And this is, you know, a given, but the key to this is simply let the customer know exactly what's going to happen during their service visit. You know, one thing that comes to my mind, recommended services, for example. You know, making recommendations based on the factory recommended services is absolutely a great way to get started, because we all know that a customer can very easily pick up their phone, look and see exactly what the manufacturer recommends for the car. And if we're recommended services that are above and beyond flushes and you know, whatnot, you know, there becomes a disconnect very quickly. So we know that there's going to be additional service recommendations made at some point during the service, but staying right there on that factory recommended service makes the customer start to build trust in us. So there's 3 points I'd like to make on this, and I'm sorry, I know Amanda's going to ask us some questions real quick, but I think if we keep it down to the simple, if we make sure the customer understands what we're going to do, when we're going to do it, and when means When's the car going into the shop? When am I going to call you? And when are you going to get it back? And thirdly, making sure the customer understands exactly how much it's going to cost. Again, all going back to transparency, which equals trust. Okay, Amanda.
Those are great points, Jack, and thank you to everyone so far. I think there's been some really valuable and certainly relatable information that we've shared. So yeah, let's get into our first Q&A session. Again, if you have a question for the team, please just type it into the chat box in our Zoom meeting, and we will get to it. We'll take a few questions right now, maybe pause for just a couple minutes, and then we'll jump into the second half, and we'll have another opportunity to ask questions towards the end. But again, keep them coming. We've got a few great ones in already. Feel free to type away, and we will respond to them as they come in. So here's one. In your experience, what factors have the biggest impact on increasing customer satisfaction? And is having an express lane essential to that?
I'll take this one if you guys don't mind. You know, I think it is absolutely crucial that the express service is available. You know, it's the services that we don't necessarily make a lot of money on that are absolutely crucial. But if we can get the customer's car in and out in a reasonable amount of time for an oil change, they'll think about us for, let's say, tires. But if it takes an hour and a half to get an oil change, when they think about getting tires or brakes or additional services, they're probably not going to look, you know, towards us for that, simply because, just like all of us, time is so precious. Good question. Thank you.
Thanks. And here's another one related to the express lane. What is a good a good gross profit percentage for an express lane? I know you guys take a lot of deep dives into financials, so can you tell us a little bit more about that? Maybe a good industry benchmark?
So I can take that one really quickly for everybody. And it's a great question. It does vary a lot from manufacturer to manufacturer. So when we do our financial evaluation, it's one of the things that we look at. Express lane gross profit generally runs between 80 and 84%. So that would be some good benchmarks for you to take away from this meeting, is just to maintain that labor gross profit right in that wheelhouse.
Yeah, and we actually just got a comment in, which I couldn't agree more with, and maybe you guys can expand a little bit based on your experience, that customers value their time more so than the price. I think we can all relate to that in how we work with businesses and who we choose to give our business to. Do you guys want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, Amanda, I could speak to that. Yeah, I think Amazon is a testament to that, right? When you order something and the next day it's, you know, at your door. I couldn't get to the mall that quickly and back in between work and my kids and everything else going on. So yeah, time is really of the essence. And I think that's where that customer-centric approach comes in, understanding what's key to your customers. You may have a customer that doesn't mind sitting in the lounge area, but more often customers are busy. They want you to interact with them in a way that expedites the process. As Jack mentioned, it's transparent. So they're not spending a lot of extra time trying to figure things out. Everything is shared with them up front, and it's an expedited process when they come back to pick up their car. The car is delivered for them.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like a full disclosure type statement, right?
Yeah, absolutely, Jack.
We are getting some good conversation in the Q&A. So another participant is saying, I think you need to build value and trust with customers. And if you do that, the time is less of a factor. I think that probably differs for every customer, right? So what do you guys think about that? And it's always a balance. So how do we balance building the value and building the trust, and also respecting the time and the cost involved in the transaction?
Amanda, I will, go back to what I mentioned earlier about, just explaining to the customer what the amenities are that you offer. There again, if you're washing every car, you made that investment. You bought an alignment checker to help the customer protect their investment, save money on tires. We just simply have to talk to them about it, and if we're doing that, I would agree 100%. They're not worried about it, cost and time as much as value, as long as we're having that conversation. I just all too often find the conversations are not taking place.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Great point. All right, let's get to one more, and then we can move on to the second half of the presentation. Here's a great point, and I think we're going to dive into this in a little bit. I think in the profitability section, if I'm not mistaken. But this says, when implementing new technologies, it's sometimes a challenge to persuade more experienced advisors to adopt a new way of doing things. Any advice on how to make that transition more successful?
So it's something we experience a lot, Amanda, and this is a great question. And it really comes from the adoption early on when we're introducing new technologies, because I mean, I'll give you a real life example. I just spent some time upgrading my wife's phone recently, and she fought it tooth and nail because she liked the way that her old phone worked. It was something she was quite comfortable with. And when I was able to really spend some time and explain the benefits of longer battery life, faster speeds and all that, she bought onto the change. In our world, in fixed operations, it comes down to really making sure that our teams fully understand the direction that we're going. And Jack's going to speak a lot to that in a couple of minutes about technologies and how our employees really feel our dealerships are headed. But really how it's going to help us put us a step ahead of the competition, because the competition is strong and the competition has the technologies coming into their world faster than we have them coming into ours in some respects. And so I'm an old dog. I said I had many years in retail, and so to adapt to new things can be challenging. However, it's making sure that everybody on the team understands the full benefits behind it and how it's going to impact their world and make their world better, and more importantly, deliver a better result to the overall consumer. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's about, is the overall end result for the consumer.
Absolutely. Okay, we had one more, sorry, come in that we'll get to, and then we'll dive into the rest of the presentation. Robert, just because I know you're a stats man and you're the one who threw it out, we had a comment. Robert, 84% would be great. How? And I know we'll dive into the how in a little bit. But, do you want to address that one?
Oh, I love a challenge. So it really comes down to the technicians that we have, the type of work coming through, and our pricing structures in the marketplace. Justina had mentioned the areas that we evaluate when we do our business evaluation in a dealership. And this is a statistic that we look at quite a bit. And we analyze where the dealer currently is based on industry standards, and then we compare them to where they are and put together a plan so that we can help them become successful. So there's a lot of factors that go into how we get to 84%. And many of them come through, again, the type of technician that we have, our pricing structures, and the type of work coming through Express at the same time. And what we are able to do, Amanda, is really identify just how that would work in a dealership so we can help make them successful and put together the right plans to be able to drive that gross profit percentage up.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for your input, and thanks everyone for your questions and comments. Please keep them coming. For now, we will dive into the second half of our presentation, but we have more time reserved a little bit later to come back to Q&A, so keep them coming.
Thank you again, Amanda. Well, great questions. Talent management, recruiting, onboarding, retaining productive, top-notch employees. This is something that is not new. I mean, I fought back in the 80s to get technicians, to hire them, find them, keep them. And so I think it's probably a subject that's near and dear to everyone's heart. But I do think there's some things that we can do. And going back to, again, sorry to be redundant, but a foundational approach I think is very important. So I do want to bring up a couple of things. The statement here that says 1 in 3 dealers agree that, training employees is a top challenge. And I would fare to guess that number is probably higher than that. But out of this 30%, we also find that same 30% are not making that investment in training their staff beyond what the OEM requires. And we know that we have to do what the manufacturer asks us to do, whether that's from a certification, whatever minimum standards that we have to meet. But, I really want to focus on that word investing, because investing in training in helping our staff with their skills, whether it's at the drive or in the shop, it is money well spent. Because if we invest, we make their skills better. If we don't invest, we're going to spend the money anyway. And what I mean by that is simply this. If we don't train the technicians and they don't have the skills to do their job at their best, we'll end up having a comeback. And, we don't necessarily always see that, but we have to pay for that, whether we're paying for a part, whatever it might be, but we're losing revenue as we're working on that car for the second time. When we come back to the service drive, if that service advisor doesn't have the skills to handle the customer, handle them properly, what happens? The customer goes away. Again, probably not a measurable impact at all times, but if that customer goes away, we know that we pay. So if we look down at the bottom, 61% of our employees believe that the dealership is not using the latest technologies. And, I often see tablets that the dealer has already purchased that are just stacked up on a file cabinet, not being used. And employees see that, even though the dealers made the investment. And so, that's probably very frustrating to all of us. Another area that I see is, for example, service pricing guides, software that's not necessarily inexpensive, a great way to improve efficiencies in the service department. But if it's not maintained, it's not kept up to date, and people become to not trust or distrust it, what happens? The technician now sends a message to the parts department to get a price quote, or worse, goes to the parts counter and waits, or the advisors call in. It's just simply a waste of resources. So technology is there, and all too often I see it's being purchased, but not necessarily utilized. In the middle there, 12% of the people think the dealership is way behind the times. And I think you can link that back to technologies that I just mentioned and others as well. The third point down here at the bottom, I think really hits home with me, and it says that 25% of the people working in our stores believe the dealership is not necessarily headed in the right direction. And of course, it's never, money's no object, and we just don't have an open checkbook. But if their belief is that we're going in the right direction or not going in the right direction, that concerns me from the standpoint that there is 1 out of every 4 people that are working our dealership that can be recruited away from us. And we have to spend the money, time, effort to replace them if that happens. So I think it's very important for us to think about that. So just a couple of other points on talent management, recruiting, onboarding, retaining. How do we do this? I mean, we're doing exactly the same thing as the dealer down the street, the same as the dealer across town. And I think that we have to look at it from the standpoint of, it's easy to throw money at it. I can just simply pay everybody more than, my competitor. And that's really not the answer. Do we have to pay fair? Absolutely. Do we have to pay at market value? Absolutely. But I think if we sit back and look at what do we have to offer, how are we different? Whether that is the 401k plan, the insurance, whatever our benefits are that we offer that we're already paying for, we need to make sure that we're communicating that. But, have we thought about, do we have flexible work hours? Do we have flexible work shifts? Do we have a training plan that we can put in front of a potential employee that is in writing? If you come to work for us, this is what you'll get from a training perspective to make you better for your career. I think that, going down to, and I will jump around here just for a second, but creating a positive work environment and culture. Is there a career path? If I have somebody that's working in the express, area, for example, and they want to be an apprentice or they want to be an A-Tech 1 these days, how do they get there? Do we have that in writing? And I think it's crucial that we take those steps. Going back up, the cost of turnover, there's a lot of numbers out there in the industry. Cox says that, it's a minimum of $10,000 to replace someone. A lot of studies out there say it's much more if you start including missing revenue and that sort of thing. But that's something that doesn't hit a specific line on the financial statement. And sometimes it can be overlooked. As Justina mentioned earlier, advisors are almost at the 50% mark, but everybody in the dealership, or excuse me, in the service department, it's over 40%. So it's a tremendous impact to our bottom line. The last bullet point there is develop leadership. And often with our processes, when we're doing a consultation and we're talking about these areas, management can often tell us, we simply don't have time to do this. And, my response is always the same. We can be proactive and we can put these processes into place, keep good, talented people, or we can be reactive and spend a lot of times trying to find and replace people. So talent management is a huge part of managing our business in fixed operations that I think so often is overlooked, and there's simply just not enough time invested in it. So, with that, we're going to talk about other areas of opportunity with Robert Peterson.
Hey, thanks, Jack. Appreciate that. So dealership profitability is something that I'm pretty passionate about. And when we think about it, it's really the measurement of how our departments are performing. And without it, in any business, it's really difficult for that business to be successful. As Justina alluded to earlier, in our industry, margins have grown and shrunken in every new car deal. And there's been a greater focus now on fixed operations profit to deliver that profitability for a dealership. And as we've already discussed, the profits in fixed operations have been increasing as a percentage of total dealership gross, but there's still a huge opportunity to improve. So let's really quickly take a look at dealership returns. And what this graph shows is in 2018, a study was done by Ward's Auto, and they showed that dealerships retained 33% of overall customer service visits. What that means is that 67% of the customers that need a vehicle serviced are going someplace else, someplace that didn't sell them the vehicle. And so when we think about what those opportunities are, this is a huge opportunity for us to grow, guys. And we think about how we're marketing, how we're getting customers back into the dealership. Are we getting our used cars back into the dealership? Because that's a great opportunity to improve overall sales in dealerships, because it's a car that has more mileage on it and the opportunity there for additional services is greater. While we focus so much on getting new car customers back, in the studies that we do, we notice there's a huge opportunity to bring used car customers back into the dealership. So what causes customers to come back? And it's all about trust. And 53% of the customers that do come back to the dealership talk a lot about how they trust the dealership. This is where they call home. We think about that initial greeting at the car. The first impression the customer has pulling into the dealership. Is somebody going to greet them at the vehicle so they can feel welcome? Are they going to be able to build a relationship by introducing them by name? Are we able to grow that customer's confidence in what we do? And that builds trust, and that builds in that over a period of time. 45% of the customers had a great experience when they purchased their vehicle. So hats off to our sales team members for making sure that our customers enjoyed having that purchase experience so much that they wanted to come back and utilize our service department. And then a statistic that Justina spoke about earlier, where our customers are 1.5 times more likely to utilize the service department if they're introduced to service at time of purchase. 21% said they came back because they were introduced to service at time of purchase. I think about that as like customers want to know where to go. They want to know what to do. They want to be invited, and they want to be introduced to a service advisor. And to Jack's point earlier, if there's an opportunity for them to book their appointment online, how great of an opportunity it would be to show them how to do that and what that resource looks like, so that we're able to continue to retain those customers, both new and used, to our dealerships. So now that we've talked about returns coming back to dealerships and why customers come back, I'm going to switch gears a little bit and talk about some areas of opportunity for profitability. So I could spend a couple of days talking about areas of dealership profitability and talk a lot about statistics and a lot of numbers to where it would drive everybody crazy. But today I'm going to talk about 4 things. And the first one I'll talk about is increasing customer returns for service. Profit gets harder to create if we're not increasing the customers coming back to do service with us. Now, we can improve our dollars per repair order, we can increase our labor rates, but if customers aren't coming back into our dealerships for service, it makes it really hard for us to turn higher profits. And our consultants really work side by side with your consultants to be able to help build what we just talked about was the largest factor of customers coming back to the dealership, trust. And that soft skill is so important because customers can tell right away when they meet somebody if they're a trustworthy individual or not. They get that impression in just a couple of seconds. And we really work with your teams to be able to make sure that we can build that trust with your customers. The next thing I'll talk about is reducing discounts on labor. And this is a really interesting topic because there's a couple schools of thought. And the first school of thought is, well, I'm just going to reduce or eliminate the ability for my advisors to be able to give discounts on labor so that when they go to close out a repair order, gosh darn it, no matter what, I'm going to get all the money on the repair order. And I think about what that does to our team members, and we think about all of the things that come at them on a daily basis. And here's just one more roadblock for them to do their job. And I know that this is the feedback because I've gotten this feedback from service consultants working in a dealership. Just one more roadblock. I've got to go find my manager to get them to type in the authorization code for me to be able to get a discount on this repair order. And it just creates a lot of havoc, and it takes time away from the overall transaction with the consumer. I like to think about it in a different sense. You know, one of the things that we talk about is how do we build value? How do we build value in what we do? And Jack spoke a lot about the price mentality, and it becomes a transactional exchange with the consumer. What we work on is building value in the service. Customers don't come in for a set of brake pads, right? They come in because their vehicle isn't stopping, right? Customers don't come in to get a water pump replaced. They come in because there's fluid on their garage floor. Our job is to help train our advisors and to work with our advisors to be able to talk about elimination of a symptom so that the customer knows that their life is going to continue on in the way that it's always been. Because as we've already discussed today, customers value their time so much. And it's really important that we're able to build value in what we do and how we can represent that from the customer coming back to the store, that we're able to retain that higher mark on our labor so that we don't have to think about how we're going to discount it. So the next area is increasing the effective labor rate. And our effective labor rate goes tandem with the amount of labor that we're keeping from every billed labor hour that we maintain. By improving our effective labor rates just a small little bit on a monthly basis, it can reap incredible returns from a profitability standpoint. This is something that we look at when we do our initial evaluation in dealerships, and something that we trend and we monitor along the way as well. And we identify just where some of that leakage is from an effective labor rate standpoint so that we're able to help you continue to maintain that overall effective rate that is so important to the success of our stores. And then the last thing I'll talk about is total departmental expense awareness. Now, that's easy for me to say. And the first step is really understanding where you are as it relates to expenses and where you should be. And there's many times when we'll go evaluate a dealership and we sit down and we start talking about the percentage of personnel and semi-fixed expenses as a percentage of overall gross profit. And there's just not that awareness of where the dealer should be or where they're at. What they know is their store is not making money. And when we did the survey earlier, half of you all said that profitability is a major area of opportunity. And what we do when we take a look into the financials of your stores, we really analyze exactly where the expenses lie, where they should be, and what our recommendations will be so we can help bring those under control. Obviously, as we grow gross profit through building greater value in the service and retaining a higher effective labor and improving the overall repair order effectiveness, we increase gross profit, which helps that bottom line. But if we're not paying attention to and controlling expenses at the same time, all that increase in gross profit is going to do nothing but erode because expenses are going to continue to grow. So I've talked a lot about dealership profitability and why customers come back. Let's talk about the business evaluation that Justina touched on earlier. By having a business evaluation completed at your dealership, we can really take a holistic look at your fixed operations business. We have the opportunity to hear from you about where your opportunities are, where you see it. And then we help set your goals, and we go through all this entire evaluation to provide a customized solution of implementation. Now there's 5 components to the evaluation that we do. The first is a mystery shop. This is where we take a look at your business through the eyes of the consumer. We look at your digital footprint. We take a look at your appointment setting process. Is it easy to find where the service area is of your website? Or do customers have to click to be able to find service? And usually by the second click, people have given up. We pull into the dealership with a vehicle. We take a look and see just how welcoming it is. what it looks like from the customer standpoint. Now, we're not going to tell you to repaint your walls, but what we are going to talk about is what the overall environment is like from a consumer, so that we're able to help install recommendations to help you be able to create a better environment for your consumers. The next thing we look at is a business practices process analysis. I have to say that rather slowly. And this is where we put on the hat of a consultant. And we spend a few days in the dealership really identifying the processes that are working, where the areas of opportunity are, and we put together a customized game plan for use of implementation so that we can all be successful at the same time. But we know in JM&A and in the world of our industry that nothing happens without people. And we know that, to Jack's point and Justina's point earlier about turnover, we know that people is the largest expense that we have in our industry. And so what we do is we do complete evaluations of your team members, all the key members in fixed operations, so that we can really understand the competencies and the behaviors that go into each role, understand what they're good at, understand where their strengths are, understand where their opportunities are for improvement to deliver a better result for you. And then we put together recommendations that are very much customized to that individual, so that they can grow in their career, they can grow in their aspirations, and again, they can deliver a better result for you. We look at non-financial KPIs. So we identify and we review technician and advisor performances, so that we're able to see where the leakage is there, where the opportunities are, so we can put together, again, continue to add to that plan to be able to improve your overall result. And then lastly, the financial analysis. This is where we really look at your financial statements in a way that helps us understand and helps you to understand where your business lies and where the opportunities are. So we look at gross profits. We compare your gross profits to industry benchmarks. We take a look at dollars and hours per repair order. We look at your facility utilization, technician proficiencies. We measure your overall profitability so we can see exactly where you lie as it relates to the standards. And then lastly, we look at gross per employee, gross per technician and advisor, and what that should look like from a capacity standpoint, so that you're able to build the team and be able to improve your overall result. And through this, it helps us to improve the overall operation in your dealership. So what does that look like? You know, our approach to your success is really customized to each evaluation. It's a method to identify the areas of greatest impact. And we do this because we know there's not a one size fits all, and we don't have a cookie cutter approach. And the evaluation that we would do for a dealership in the same market area as you would be way different than the one that we would do for you, because we know that each dealership is unique. Even in dealer groups that we work, we know that each dealership is unique. And our approach is to make sure that what we put together with you and your teams, we're able to identify exactly where the opportunities lie and be able to implement proven successes so that we're able to be sustainable. And, you know, I want to talk about that word a little bit, sustainability. And sustainable processes for a solid foundation. Processes for a solid foundation have to be repeatable, have to be measurable, have to be easy. And what we put together with your teams is we put together sustainable and repeatable processes so that the team can adapt quickly, so that they're able to be successful. And our solutions are designed with very specific and measurable goals to your profitability. But these specific and measurable goals do not put together a performer that says, we're just going to start clubbing customers over the head and taking them for everything they're worth. We want to make sure that the processes that we put in place and the way that we work with your teams is very customer-centric, as we just discussed, very customer-focused, so that your team is able to build stronger relationships, which is the number one reason customers come back, is because of trust, and be able to grow the profitability in your dealership. And this is done through hands-on support from our experts. Now, because of COVID, we have definitely changed our business model, and we have 3 different ways that we can now offer our consulting. The first one that I'll discuss is 100% virtual, and that is exactly what it says. 100% of our coaching comes from a virtual standpoint. Every week, one of our qualified team members is meeting with your management team and reviewing processes, practices, and financial returns, so they're able to coach your management team to success. The second option we have is a hybrid, and that's where we spend 70% of the time in the dealership, 30% of the time outside of the dealership, utilizing the virtual coaching I just discussed. And then the last offering we have is 100% in-store. And that's where our team is working with your team side by side, live in the moment coaching in the drive, to be able to drive those sustainable and repeatable processes that we've seen work so well in dealerships. I want to say thank you all very much. Now I'll turn the meeting over to Amanda again.
Thanks, Robert.
You bet.
So I just dropped into the chat a link. So if you want to talk to our team more, I think it's clear that there's a wealth of information and so much more knowledge that they have to share. So to talk to them and find out more, I encourage you to go to the website that's on your screen. I dropped it in the chat. You can actually take a picture with your phone's camera, and that will take you, the QR code will take you to the website. Just click on the orange button or scroll to the bottom. You'll find a one-to-one contact form. It's a very short form with just some quick information, just to let us know that you're interested in learning more and talking more with us. And we'll be happy to have that conversation with you and let you know how we can help you achieve that profitability that you're looking for in your service drive. So we did, I know we're running tight on time. We did have a couple more questions pop in. So let's, before we get to those, if we could just jump right ahead. I do want to let you know that there's a lot more information on Insider. Our Fixed Ops team has actually done a video series on service tips, valet service tips, especially in the time of COVID. There's also information on sales, F&I, training, and a lot more. One question did come in. Yes, we are going to share this recording with all of you, so you can look for that email sometime tomorrow. That'll include the link to the website again, as well as this full recording of today's video. In addition, another way that you can get more information from JM&A Group, if you haven't had a chance already, our podcast, The Walk Around, is where we talk to experts in business and in automotive. So you can get listening wherever you find your podcast. We have, I believe, 5 or 6 episodes live, with more coming very, very soon. Some really interesting information that's helpful for dealerships, for careers, all of the above. I do want to get to a couple more questions before we end for the day. So guys, whoever would like to take the next one up. Let's see. Have you seen marketing budgets grow in terms of service offers, especially through the pandemic? Should there be a greater emphasis on used versus new customers?
So I'll be more than happy to answer that question. I have seen digital marketing budgets increase, short term, especially now as we're going through the pandemic. As it relates to the question of should the emphasis be on used cars versus new, I think the emphasis should be on all customers. And it doesn't matter if they purchase the vehicle new or used, if it's your brand or not. We should do everything that we can in our world to ensure that that guest comes back to our service department to utilize us. It doesn't matter if it's a new or used vehicle in my world, because every customer that buys a vehicle from us is important. And as we looked at earlier, Amanda, we talked about 67% of those opportunities going elsewhere out of the marketplace other than coming to new car dealers. All customers should be marketed to, and all customers should be invited back to our dealerships.
Great, thank you. Here's another one. I know we just talked about the valet services that are available, the videos on Insider. Do you see pickup and delivery services as essential to your business?
I can talk to that, Amanda. When we were first under quarantine and we were released from quarantine, we had several local dealers here in my market in South Florida that were very quick to create a touchless approach where they came directly to your home. They would sanitize the vehicle. They would make sure that the seats were covered, the steering wheel was covered. They would, leave your key when they came back outside your door. So you didn't have to have any contact with them. One thing I've noticed in my last time reaching out to the dealer is fewer of them are offering that now. So I think it's still important, again, as we mentioned today, to have that customer-centric approach, to really ask the customers what's important to them. And that's not a question that's been asked when I've called into service departments recently. Some of them are offering it, some aren't. I think it's just important that they continue to work with their dealers, with their customers rather, and seeing what specific needs they have.
Thank you, Justina. And we'll take one final question before we wrap up. Here's one that came in. I try to emphasize to my advisors the importance of greeting the customer as soon as they come out of their car. Do you agree with that? And have you seen any data or surveys that show how crucial that step is?
Well, I think they're 100% right. And I can't say that I have data showing an improvement in customer satisfaction or even their buying habits if that happens. But you can certainly measure it by the smile on their face, you know, and I think if you're a road service, and it's been many years for me, but that experience with the customer, if you get started off on the right foot, the experience is probably going to go better. But I think we've all seen that customer in the service drive that just doesn't know where to go, and they have that lost look on their face. And, you know, one thing that we often see is, you know, the porter that is not supposed to greet a customer necessarily walk right past the customer that's in the car. They don't think about it, but the customer says, hey, there's someone that's not talking to me, for example. So yes, it's absolutely crucial.
Thank you, Jack. And I know we're a couple minutes over, so I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank you, Justina, Robert, and Jack, for lending your insights and your expertise. This has been incredibly valuable and a fantastic presentation. Again, if you want to talk to our team more, I encourage you to follow that link that's in the chat. You'll get it in your follow-up email as well, and find out more about fixed operations consulting at JM&A Group, and fill out our form to talk more with our team and find out how we can support you in your dealership and your success. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful afternoon. We appreciate your time.
Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Have a good day.